Cool. So this morning we're doing something a little special. For those who have not joined Q-SYS Communities for Developers, I highly encourage you go to developers.qsys.com. In there, we have one of the groups is Show Us Your Q-SYS. And it's a great place to show off different projects you've done, different integrations, everything. This project has gotten so big that it's easier to just do it as a straight up webinar than try and sit and write everything up. So what we're going to do, we're going to spend probably the first 10 minutes or so just talk a little bit about this little teeny light show you see behind me. And then we'll dive into how we're using Q-SYS with it. So let's kick it off. I'm going to actually share just a little teeny clip showing off what it is. Let's hope we get some audio through here with this. And let's take a look, see.
We wish you a Merry Christmas.
Jingle bells, jingle bells. Let it snow, let it snow. Oh, jingle, jingle. Better watch out, go Santa Claus.
So hopefully Zoom did a little bit of justice to that. I will throw, I think I can throw a Q&A. I'll throw a Q&A at the end with a full link to the YouTube recording of that. But that is our neighborhood light show. So this is the Lucy Depp Park Light Show. We are just northwest of Columbus, Ohio. So this year we have 8 houses all tied together. We're covering about 10 acres of Christmas lights throughout. As you can see in the picture, it's a drive-through. People come, drive every night. We get anywhere from 200 to 400 or 500 cars a night. Luckily, the whole neighborhood's involved in this, so nobody complains about all the traffic. It's a half-mile loop. You can drive around as many times as you want. It's an 8-minute show. It just goes on a loop every night from about dusk till 10 or 11. There are 247,190 channels. So there's a lot. And I'll show in a second the lights we use and why it's that high. To pull that off, we have 20 different show controllers located throughout all the houses. Those break out to 120 expander boxes. There's a lot of stuff. Last count, and actually this just went up last night because I threw some more stuff on to show off today, but about 56-ish network devices that all need to work to pull this off. So it is a lot of stuff to manage, and that's really where we use the power of Q-SYS a lot to help manage, monitor, and control everything going on. So starting with the lights, you can see my wonderful assistant there. It's actually her birthday today. So we have roughly 82,394 if I do the math. We stopped counting. It's at the point when we order lights, we buy them by the pound and not the individual bulbs. But as you can see here, these are what are called WS2811 pixels. So every single bulb actually has 3 channels on it. It has red, green, and blue. So we can control every single bulb on every single tree. We have no traditional lights left. So when we started about 8 years ago, we started with 160 channels of just regular dimmers. They were called a lightorama if anybody's done lights before. A really nice, easy way to tie your regular Christmas lights in, animate a show. We could run the whole thing on a single DMX universe. Life was easy. Then we got hooked on pixels, and here we are 8 years later. So we start hanging in about August to get all these up. Everybody hangs the lights at their house, and then my one neighbor and I, we handle all the programming, coordination, controller build, and everything. The cool thing with these are every single one has a little chip in it. It gets the data packet coming in. It strips off the first byte it sees and uses that to determine the RGB and then passes it down the string. So you can tie, without getting in crazy with power injection and stuff, you get about 250-ish off a single port of a controller. Most our trees are either 100 or 200. This tree you see here, that's a 200. So just about every tree. So we have roughly, I think the last count we did is somewhere around 400 trees that we wrap. We also have props everywhere. So I've got Baby Yoda in his pod. We've got some snowflakes. We don't have a ton of props because the trees really is sort of cool. And we're one of the only places I know that does this amount of trees with pixels, especially in a residential neighborhood. So all those trees, it's really cool, but it's all 12-volt power. So we can't go that far. We can go about 20 feet before we start having loss. So all those connect to these little breakouts on the left. And then those get wired cat back to a controller. So you can see controller on the right. I can hook up to 10 breakouts. I can actually daisy chain them, so I can do up to 30. There's some limits you run into with it. But this is the primary controller we use for everything. It has a little teeny pocket BeagleBone mount on it, very similar to a Raspberry Pi. A little teeny purpose-built computer. So every single one of these 19 controllers is running Debian Linux. It's running a piece of software called Falcon Pi Player. You can see here's a screenshot of our one player. And they all synchronize together. So each one of these has their own portion of the show on it. We're not streaming all the data across the show network because we're going long distances and everything. So they have a method for synchronizing the players together. Works sort of similar to PTP. Once a second, it sends out a packet, says I'm playing this sequence. I'm at this time code, and everybody receives it. I've actually been playing around a little bit. I can have Q-SYS actually receive that in. I haven't tried generating it yet from Q-SYS because it's a gnarly hex string, but that's something I've played a little bit with, just having some fun of trying to get Q-SYS synchronized to the second with it and everything. You'll see a little later on, we do API calls to it about every 10 seconds, and that works great for what we're doing. So every one of these is a little teeny computer running, gives us the detail, runs the show and everything. It all gets tied together with a lot of networking gear. So we are using, we originally had a bunch of D-Link switches. Those have started getting older now, so we're replacing them with these little baby neck gears. You can see we throw them outdoor in socket boxes, which make great little teeny weatherproof enclosures. And that's one of the big things we did this year, was trying to standardize everything so that we can do some of the cool Q-SYS integration you'll see in a couple minutes. That all gets wirelessly hooked up. So every property, we're crossing streets and everything. I can't just run cat cable and going. I think our furthest wireless link is a quarter mile away. So I can't really run cable easily. So we use Ubiquiti AirMax, which is super, super wideband carrier grade Wi-Fi. It's what is used by a lot of rural ISPs. Everybody connects back to this main point to multi-point antenna, and we have a bunch of these little nano stations everywhere. There's a couple different ones we use everywhere, but for the most part, it's all that. We do have Wi-Fi set up everywhere, but we aren't running anything on Wi-Fi. That's more just so when we program and accessing the Q-SYS UCI. This monstrosity here sort of shows off our network. There's a lot of stuff everywhere, and that's where this would be a really big pain to try and just manage on its own, because we have a lot of different systems together. We have the AirMax, we do have Unify running, but it's not critical to the show. We have all the independent switches. all those controllers you saw, 14 of our 20 are PoE powered, which makes it really nice to be able to remotely control them. And I'll actually do a demo of that in a couple minutes. And so, it just keeps scaling. Every year we keep adding more and more. We added net new 3 houses this year because I decided to move from my first house down the street. So I added that house. Person who bought my house added back in. Somebody built a house next to that. So we keep adding. It keeps growing. We're going to add another house next year. We also are going to try and figure out how to tie street lights going up and down through the village leading to us in, which is going to be really fun because that's going to make the distance go really, really far. But you can see up here, all our main monitoring comes from a Core 110 that is tied in with everything. And we'll take a look at that. So how do we write it all? We use a piece of software called X-Lights. It's free, it's open source, it's wonderful for doing this. This is where we actually take the show. So we make this 8-minute soundtrack. Actually, it's 7 minutes with a 1-minute opening. That 7 minutes has 8 songs in it. We make the whole thing. We do it in Audition, mix the whole soundtrack, bring it in, and then spend usually about 80 to 100 hours actually sequencing out, programming everything in, going in, finding the beats and everything. So to pull it off, we actually have the entire neighborhood 3D map. So here's our map straight out of X-Lights. Every tree, we know exactly where it is, how many pixels. A rough estimate, they're all about the same height, so we don't factor in height or terrain yet. We have talked about doing that in the future, but you can sort of see this starts to draw out everything. So we've got some snowflakes over here, houses outlined, Yoda's hiding down there. We've got pixels running down the road to help keep people from driving off into ditches or people's yards. So we have the whole thing in there. And here you can see this is sort of a better view. It takes a lot of monitors to sequence this, but as we write it, we can actually see in 3D what's going on. We can view it from the top down. And this is where myself and my neighbor has a similar setup. You'll find us pretty much the whole month of October and November sitting every night and writing this. So let's get in the Q-SYS side. Here's our head-end Q-SYS system. We have a Motorola radio hooked in. We're using that to help with some of the control, and we'll talk about that at first. Here, I've just got a touchscreen USB monitor on a little PC showing off the UCI so we can quickly see everything. We've got a Synapse DM1, which is the Dante audio monitoring box. So this allows me to listen to a couple different audio sources. I can listen to a copy of the FM feed. So we transmit it out on FM. I have a receiver here because the transmitter is actually located in the middle of the show. So this gives me my confidence is the audio going out. So I can listen to that. I can also listen to some of the radio stuff. And there's our beautiful Core 110 right down there hiding at the bottom of it. So let's dive over to Q-SYS and take a look at what's going on here. So here's our designer file. We've got everything laid out. We can see all the individual devices, all laid out inventory based off where they are. And we have a corresponding schematic page for it. So let's go over here to our little dev environment. This is a very basic look at it, but this gets scaled out across all the different houses. So we start with interfacing with Falcon Pi Player. One of the beautiful things with FPP, it has a great API. So everything you see here, I can actually just pull straight up API from the device. So one of the things we changed this year, we're starting to get to the point managing IPs for this is just not scalable. So everything's done by host name. And we're just addressing all the devices by host name. It makes it a lot easier as we're spinning everything up, bringing everything online. So we've got our player. We can see what mode our player is running in. We can get some status from the player. So this is actually, I have a Raspberry Pi sitting here in my office on one of the Netgear switches, sort of as our development test area. This is how I test all our stuff we're going to do with Q-SYS. We can see what's playing, where it's at. So it's at 26 seconds. I don't have any audio, but I could remotely control the volume if I wanted. And I can switch it. So we can go from holiday lights playing behind me. I can put a Knight Rider look on, or we can set it to go to Q-SYS Blue. There we go. We can see what host it's running. I can see if there is an update available. So I can actually remotely upgrade it. It will tell the player go out to GitHub, pull down updates. Shows me what version we're running, gives me some nice statistics on everything. So once every, I think the interval's 10 seconds. I gotta go look at my code, but about once every 10 seconds, we pull it for where it's playing at. We don't want to overload the players, and I don't really need to know. I just need to see that it's updating a little bit. I don't need to see exactly where down to the second we're at. And then about every minute we go and pull some of the extra information. I don't need to know every 10 seconds what version of software it's running. We can see if there's any scheduled events going on. And we can even do some test mode, and we're going to see if this works. I didn't test this ahead of time, so let's just try it live. I can set it red, and these pixels are actually off. So these strips are green, blue, red. So it's a little off on here, but in the software, we correct for that. So there's red, there's green, there's blue. So I can remotely do some tests. Test mode becomes really important when we go out to start hanging lights, because what we do, we don't have the show written when we start. So we want to at least do a basic test mode. Let's see if I flip this back on. There we go. So just by default, test mode will just do red, green, blue over and over and over. It's perfect for us making sure the pixels all work. If one pixel goes bad, everything down the string goes bad. So we want to know when we're hanging them that they work right. So what we do to make this easier for everybody, so everybody doesn't have to have a UCI loaded up to be able to go out and hang lights, is we have some two-way radio integration going on. So let's go into our head end, and we'll zoom in right here real quick. So that radio we saw in the rack mount is coming into the core. We're grabbing analog audio off it. And then it runs through this really cool script that I stole from our support team way back in the day. So way before we introduced the soft phone and POTS component, we needed a manual way to figure out DTMF. So what we do is we run a bunch of bandpass filters to break down the individual frequencies of DTMF. And then there's a script here that runs that listens for the DTMF tones. Everybody in the neighborhood's got a radio. This is a little bit bigger one. They have some with sequences built in, but what I can do, and we'll see if it'll reach from down here, is try to mute that so I don't get feedback. So we can see I did 1, 2, 3 pound. They have a little sequence programmed in their radio that automatically decodes, and we've got a little API we basically wrote. 1, 2, 3 pound turns the lights on. 4, 5, 6 pound turns the lights off. Pretty nice and easy. So now pretty much anywhere in the neighborhood, you can stand with the radio, flip the lights on and off. So that number comes into this script. And then one of the beauties is this script uses notifications. So notifications is a method in Lua where I can send a message from one script to many. So it will look for that. So if we turn our test mode off, we saw 4, 5, 6. It sends test out, and it sends that out as a notification. All the FPP scripts listen for that. So when I need to spin up a new controller, I come over to where it is, make a copy of the FPP script, paste it right in, and we're good to go. It automatically starts grabbing those hooks. So I can spin up ahead of time. I know what controllers we're adding for the year, have them all in here. And when we do this, we'll see all these start flipping. And in a second, we'll see as these start updating, we'll actually see these statuses start reporting back from remote idle. They'll start going into test mode in a couple seconds. And it's going to be the longest couple seconds. There we go. We see that one pulled in, that pulled in. They all start pulling in as they get their updates. So we can see everything's testing. One of the other cool parts we did with that is we've got audio from the radio coming in. We can also send audio back out to the radio. So we've got Jason Krasavage on our plugin development team wrote a really cool text-to-speech with using Google's API. I've got some basic ones set. We'll talk a little bit about this one down here in a minute, but when something happens, when we send that notification, we also send audio back out. So let's flip these off. And it send out turning off lights. I've got really bad reception down here because I'm in the basement, but we get audio feedback, so we know what actually happens, and you don't sit and go, well, did it turn on or off? It tells us very easily. So we can easily turn our test mode on and off. That's what we use a lot before the show starts. We use it pretty much every day from August on. We can also start and stop the show, so I can actually manually start and stop the show. That's great for when we're programming and I want to go watch it. There's this brightness here. I program at night because I work during the day. When I go to run the show at like 3 in the morning, I like to keep my neighbors a little happy with me. So we will, I can actually send a command and it'll dim the whole show down to like 10%. There's a lot of times I just need to see how something looks. I don't need to see it at full brightness. There is also, and it is not tied in the radio because it would be a really bad idea, but I use this method to send an update all. So this will send, when there's an update, I need to update all 19 controllers. I don't have to hit every one and hit update, update, update. I can hit that update all. It sends a notification out and everybody goes and grabs their software updates. Now that the show's running, we really sort of just keep it all setting. We don't really run updates unless there's a fix we need to do. So that's on our two-way radio side. The next part we get into is, let's dive into our UCI a little. So we start using this as we get more and more stuff up and running. So here's our UCI for everything. This is probably the most important right here. This is an overall combination. Every schematic page or location has its own status combiner. I can really quickly and easily see the status of anything going on. And then I have an overall system status. When everything's great, it has a ton of information populating it. And I'll show why we have all this information here. But as we get faults, it will isolate down to just the fault. The overall system status also does the border around this. So it makes it really easy if I'm walking by the rack to see what's going on. Or my neighbor actually has this up on like a 60-inch TV in his garage. So he's watching it all the time too. We can start and control the show from here. So if I tell it to, let's just run our show over sequence. This will get it start playing, and we'll see in a second, it'll start updating what's rolling. We also then can dive into any of the FPP instances. So here are all those controllers we have everywhere. I can click on any one of the controllers and see what's going. I don't think I hit play hard enough on that button. There we go. Now we see it playing. So there it's rolling. It's telling me it's going to run this sequence, and it'll start pulling in some time code in a minute from it. We've got our RF. So one of the cool things here, here's where we can monitor that two-way radio coming in. Flip our transmit notifications on in just a sec. We can see here's our FM coming back. So we've got a script in here. What it does is it watches the FM. Now, during the day when there's nothing going, there's not really a ton of noise. There's a little bit of noise floor because it's FM. But this script actually sits and watches, is there a sequence playing? Is there a show playing? And if there is, and I detect audio, great, give me an okay status. If the show's playing and there's no audio, give me a fault, because now I know I don't have FM audio for the show. If I see audio playing and the show's not playing, give me a fault. That way I know, hey, something is not working, or maybe somebody else decided to transmit on the frequency or something. We can see it that way. And then finally, if no audio, no show, give me an okay. So very quickly and easily do that. All the wireless uplinks we have. So the wireless point-to-points, those are all managed through a tool called UISP. UISP, it's Ubiquity Internet Service Provider. It used to be Ubiquity UNMS, which is Ubiquity Network Management Service. I still call it that all the time. It has a really robust API, so I can actually go in and get status from it. So we can see, and these actually just flipped in a second. I can see my signal strength, I can see my upload speed, I can see my download speed, and report that back as status. So I can actually see the link from my house back to the main system is 129 meg down, 202 meg up, which is really good considering it's going 1,500 feet or so through the outdoors. So, and shooting through a tree as well. So we can monitor all those statuses of all that. Where that becomes really helpful is we can bring all that into Reflect. So let me pull up Reflect real quick here. And let's bring up our site. So here's my site in Reflect. It's just a little bigger. So everything we see is running through monitoring proxies. And that way it can report up to Reflect. And I can see those statuses. So I can see this player, it's remote, it's in remote mode and it's playing. We can see this switch has an uptime of something. I'm still trying to figure out a little bit about that. We'll talk about the switches in a second. That's our newest addition this year. And here's this AirMax. So this has a 90 dB signal. It's 36 by 25. This is probably one of the worst links we have. It's shooting through like 30 trees to get back to the antenna, and it can barely see the antenna. But it's good enough to send the sync packet. And even when we do firmware and stuff, it still works. It's just a little slow. So all that reports here. If there's any issues we have, Reflect will automatically email myself and one of my neighbors. So we both have access to it. We can remotely pull up the UCI through Reflect, but we primarily use it as an alerting mechanism. So we have Reflect automatically send us an email when there's an issue with anything, and then we know to go resolve it. So, and our last part here is our network monitoring. So I'm going to actually dive back into Q-SYS and show this. This is one of the cool things we did this year. And once I've got about one more thing I want to add into it, and then I'm going to actually publish it up to communities on the Code Exchange. So we can see there's that FPP script we saw. Here's our monitoring proxy taking all that information up to Reflect. And that's how we ran it the last couple of years with this. We've had Q-SYS on top of this for at least 4 years. Up until this year, we did that. This year, I want to take it a little bit further, though. Now that most of our controllers are all PoE powered, I wanted to not only get notified, but I wanted Q-SYS to proactively respond to it. So what this script does is this is using the SNMP library. So SNMP is a standard management practice. Almost every managed switch supports it. And a lot of people use it just to get information from stuff. This is how network monitoring systems will go in and get port utilization and uptime and all that stuff. SNMP also has the ability, though, to send values to devices. So the first part here, we're just looking at the switch. This is a switch sitting on my desk on our test net. So I can see basic information. It's pulling in if I were to rename the switch or rename its description or location, all that would pull down from the switch. So it is live updating that from the switch. It's getting the uptime from the switch. I know this is not exactly, I think it's hour, yeah, it's hour, minute, second, because I plugged this in last night. So, but where the real power comes is down here. So here I am getting the port link status. So we can see I have port 8 as my uplink, port 1 is my controller. But I have statuses that I can wire into. So we can see on each one, go back. Here's a great example because there's a lot. This is a almost map-like representation of what is plugged into what port on that switch. So when I go and set up an area, I come mimic it in Q-SYS and wire it into the appropriate ports on the switch. Because now all those statuses of those devices feed right into our script. And in our script, we can tell it, do I want to cycle the PoE on the port so I can turn off and then, or turn on the PoE for that port? And I have this auto mode. So auto mode will watch this status automatically. So let's watch this sort of live. Here is the FPP controller, the Pi sitting in my office here running this, and I'm going to purposely crash it. So I'm going to crash it. It's going to tell me in a second the software is not running on here. So it's not running. And what we will see happen if we watch.
Dev FPP, FTPV, not
that actually
running.
cut me off. So that device status comes in, triggers a fault. That went through our monitoring proxy. That also feeds straight to our text-to-speech. So whatever device causes an issue, it's going to read off from our overall combined monitoring status, and it's going to trigger text-to-speech, send it out radio. I have a Undy Nemo on my desk, so I can hear it at my desk when it goes off. And we can see now we had a compromised rebooting, and if you saw it right there, it waited 30 seconds. It turned the PoE off on the port. It turned it back on. And in a minute, we'll probably get another alert in just a second saying that the device is unreachable because it actually just rebooted the Pi. And then we'll see the Pi come back up. Yep.
Dev FPP.
So we can see it go out. It's got the fault. And this Pi, cross our fingers, is one of the quicker ones to boot. In a couple seconds, it's going to come right back up and report back up. There we go. We see it's running there, and we'll see the API pick it back up on the next poll cycle. So, oh, it just re-triggered itself. So, we'll see it come back up in just a second. It waited too long off that fault. So this is something we're still, the way I'm killing it right now is not a normal way we do it. So we wait for it to completely fail. But this has been wonderful. We have controllers that just for no rhyme or reason drop their NIC. Everything works great for about right until about like the second week in December. And then they just start losing their NIC overnight. So this will go in, auto resolve them. I haven't had to manually intervene once this year with it. It's wonderful. So that's sort of cool. The cool part is it is doing it all just based off SNMP. So it's pretty standard across. We have one D-Link switch left. It works on the D-Link. We have a it works on the neck gears. I have some old Dells that you guys are all probably really familiar with. It works on the Dells. So it works pretty much all across the board. I found a couple of the older neck gears use a little bit different OID, which is what SNMP does. So that's the one piece I want to add, is just the ability to define that. But this is also scalable. I can go in the script right here, expand the script out to however many switch ports I have, and it'll work. So these are all 8-port, but I could run this on a 52. So really cool little script we're running with it. And that drives our text to speech. So let's go back to our head end. So we covered our audio player. We had the text to speech comes right out here. We did our FM monitoring. We also I sent it out back Dante throughout the house to monitor a couple places. And we have some SMPTE playing out here. FPV can actually sync to SMPTE. It's something I've been playing with of, do I want to move some more stuff over? As we get into relocating the FM antenna, then I can actually run it through Q-SYS. Right now, it sort of sits off its own controller just by itself there. Yeah, so that's where really we're sitting today. Some of the things we want to build out in the future with this, and we've got some framework in there, is actually doing backup and restore of the controller. So all the controller settings are stored in JSON. One of the goals this year in the off season is actually have Q-SYS automate backing those up and restoring it back in. One of the beauties is how we can do that is actually be able to load any backup of one. So if a player goes down and we see a new device show up on the network, by default, they all show up as just FPP. So if I see a host name of FPP, I actually say reload this player. The show file gets a little bigger. So most players are somewhere in the 10 to 15-ish meg range. So it's not terrible. But actually automating all that. And it just becomes a matter at that point of how much do I want to automate and let it do it. But being able to auto backup and restore would be wonderful. Probably once a year we have to reimage a player. And it's not hard. You grab the SD, load the software back on it. We keep spare SDs because all the settings get added afterwards. So we can manually set up a player in a couple minutes, but once again, the more we can automate with this, the better. We also have, I don't have it on here anymore, but I have done our color picker driving into it, which is pretty cool to be able to go stand in the middle of the woods, grab a color picker, send it right up. And yeah, that's, and then this is pretty much at a point then it's finally time to actually turn it into a plugin. So right now, this is really just a container with a script hiding in it. We use the code pin. So this is the dev one, so I don't have the code pin feeding in. But all the other ones, we keep one copy of the script right down here. And then this feeds out code pin to, it's hard to see that white on white. Thank you, dark mode. But that pin feeds out to every copy. So if I make a change, I've actually barely touched it at all this year. So
Dev.
Yep.
Dev FPP.
There we go. So it didn't like it. It crashed it. So it's gonna reboot it there. But it's been pretty dang rock solid. So Q-SYS does a great job just sitting on top of this, monitoring it, and giving an easy way. So my cohort who helps me do a lot of the programming, this makes it really easy for him to be able to come in and just touch whatever he wants without actually having to get into Designer. So with that, I'm going to go ahead, open it up for any questions or any other part we want to dive in. But I want to thank you all for coming out right before the holidays and checking this out. Hopefully I'll start throwing parts of this. If any of you are running shows, by all means, reach out. I know I've sent the script out to a handful of people. There you go. We can see something doesn't like something going on, but we can see now that FPP. I think it's that Pi got in a loop when we rebooted it. So, but we can see there, good example of it updating the status combiner and showing off, switching to a red border around it. So, and there we go, right back to normal. So, that's the goal. Have it end up resolving everything on its own. So, last thing I want to throw out, if you've got really, really cool jobs you've done, please submit them on communities, put them in the share your Q-SYS section. You know, if you've got something really big and cool like this, you want to come join, you want us to do a presentation with, we'd love to be able to show off some cool jobs, even if it's a little maybe more related to what Q-SYS is used for every day. But that's part of the cool power of this is if you can imagine it, we can pretty much make it work. So let's see, question. How much do the neighbors contribute to the tech side of it? So pretty much most of the tech is all me. I've got out of the 8 houses, my one neighbor, he helps. Him and I will collaborate on the soundtrack. He owns a DJ company, so that makes sense. He does a lot of the programming and the mapping in X-Lite, so he'll contribute a lot to building out the map. He built it originally, and then we both modify it as we go. So he does a lot of the mapping, and then we split up the programming. So he programs during the day. Then we both go out at darkish, so 7, 8 o'clock, watch it. We usually probably spend about 2 to 3 hours a night watching it, because what looks really cool on the computer doesn't necessarily always look really cool in person. So unfortunately, not everybody is watching the show from a drone up in the air. So we'll park about 8 or 9 different spots you guys sit and watch the show from, just to see what it all looks like from those different angles. So he'll program during the day, we'll watch it. I'll program at night. So he helps with that. This year, I did 4 of the songs, he did 4 of the songs. So we try and split it about even. Depending which one of you ask, we can say who's got the harder part or not for it. But all the network and everything I manage. I do all the Q-SYS side of it. And that's really the goal, is to make this easy enough that somebody who doesn't know Q-SYS can do it. We have where the FM transmitter and the main player are. There's a laptop there, so anybody could go up and do it. Him and I are really the only ones who ever touch it. But we do have it so you can access it and control it from anywhere. So a question about the sync between the players. So how successful is it over AirMax? It works really well. They can either do it multicast or broadcast. Somewhere I've got a config somewhere that's blocking the multicast. I still need to figure out exactly where it is. So I do the broadcast version of it, but it basically just sends a packet out broadcast once a second. I have never, let me think. At least the last 2 years, I've never noticed it out of sync. We had a bunch of network congestion when we first started doing it. And this was before we went to AirMax, and we were just doing Wi-Fi between 2 houses. And that I could notice the players getting out of sync. This, you can't notice at all. And I've watched it a lot from a lot of angles. So it works extremely rock solidly well for keeping them all in sync. Let's see. Have we used WLED at all? I have played with WLED. For the controllers we use, I haven't. But I've played just for fun using ESP Pix nodes. running WLED to get to receive in E131 or ArtNet. WLED is great. I've actually thought about doing it for some permanent lights on the house because it's really easy to spin up that way. So, and there's a couple bulbs you can hack. I've actually thought about hacking some smart bulbs with WLED. Somebody's looking to do this a couple years, start with the neighbors would be a good point core wise. So, one of the really cool things with this, unless you get into some of the crazy radio stuff we did, a lot of this can run on vCore. So, all the scripting, everything, the only part that vCore can't handle really is the two-way radio tie-in. Everything else can run on vCore. I've ran it on vCore. That's actually, so that was one last thing I was going to mention. One of my plans for next year is actually get a bunch of little teeny mini PCs and spin up vCore on them and actually decentralize this. Because of every house being on its own radio link, what I want to play with next year is actually having a little mini PC at each, right by each antenna. That way, if we were to lose the wireless link, that could reboot the switch there. So I want to play with decentralizing it a little bit, also because I think it'd be just sort of cool to have, 9 or so vCores all reporting to it and everything. But vCore is a great example. Great place to start with it. It's really low cost compared to a box. You can spin it up on a VM. And I think the limit today is still 16 scripts, so you could run 16 devices will get you really far, especially if you're starting with a couple. Derek has their full-length video of driving through. So I've got a video chopped between them. I know this year's been interesting. We've had multiple people just show up and start filming it and throwing it online and then hitting us up. So I know some guy actually went through last week and was taking a 3D camera through. So I know I've seen some stills he did. I think he's working on some video of it. If you just search Lucy Depp Park Light Show, I'll throw that in the question or have Jeff throw that in the question. On YouTube, you'll find all sorts of videos from it. Let's see. Oh, hey, Ryan, what's up? Ryan was about 20 minutes away. So yes, definitely come and check it out. It's right by the zoo. So if you are around Columbus, it's a great place to stop after the zoo. And we always run it at least an hour after the zoo closes. So we get a lot of people in that 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock hour, which is pretty cool. Derek asks, do we get a story every year from TV? We've been on, so we get covered in all the local newspaper, like here's where to go see lights, all that stuff. We've done 2 or 3 years we've been on the news for it. 1 year, one of the news stations hosted a like contest for like submit your Christmas lights, and I don't think they knew what they were getting into when we submitted ourselves. So that was cool. That was actually that was 4 years ago, the day Bryn was born. We did. So I rushed straight from a 4 a.m. interview to the hospital. So we do it every once in a while. We're at the point we get a lot of visitors, which is great. One of the things I didn't mention, we have a donation box. All the money goes to a rescue. So one of the neighbors in the neighborhood, she is the medical director for a rescue that grabs cats and dogs from high kill shelters. So we give all the money we donate to them. We don't keep any of it for the show. We all just spend a lot of money every year on Christmas lights. So they publicize it a lot, but we're also at the point, like most people know about it. We don't. We get asked that we've had the casting from the Christmas light fight reach out a couple of years, and we don't need to actively encourage people to come. We get a lot of people, which is awesome. Somebody asked if we have music playing outside. So we don't. It's the one way we try to keep people a little bit sane in the neighborhood. We will do we throw a big party every year on Black Friday when we start the show. It's really simple. We my neighbor brings out K12 and we put an FM receiver on it. So nothing fancy with that. I have the FM receiver I have in the house. That feeds out to my garage. So if I want to listen to it out there, or I'm going to be adding speakers in the backyard to that, I'll feed it that way. But it's just FM receivers going into speakers. Nothing insanely crazy. So here, guys, how do each string connect? So on the actual lights. So let's see. Here are the lights. You can sort of see these connectors here. They are a plastic little molded 3-pin connector. So you have 12 volt, your serial data line, and ground. There's a couple different connectors used in the Christmas light world. So there's X Connect, which is probably most popular. There's Ray Wu, which just flips which side the screw-on part is. It's sort of like it's the same type of connector you've seen in like outdoor. You see in some car stuff. Pretty basic little just 3-pin. So all the light strands have that. We have extension cords in that, and then that connects back to the differential receiver. So these right here, the other ends of these have that connector on it. So they come up in, you have 4 ports on an expansion. We do have some controllers that have combined sort of the two of this. So it has a power supply at the top. It's got like 8 local ports and 3 remote ports, or I have one. I have a 24-foot pixel tree. I forget the exact length, roughly about that. The pixel tree, it has a controller that has 16 outputs. If you're doing stuff all on the front of your house, it makes a lot of sense to use high output controllers. In our case, because of all the distance we're going, you really can only go, without getting crazy, about 20 feet out from where your power supply is. So we use a combination of this. This is in an outdoor enclosure here. We have a lot of these mounted in ammo boxes. We switched to that this year. We also have, I have some mounted in 5-gallon buckets on the upside of the lid. So we have them in different types of enclosures, but this can go, I think there's guys who've theoretically gone crazy distances with the cat between the actual controller and the differential receiver. I know we have a couple that are like 300 plus feet, but it's a serial type data signal, so you don't have the Ethernet limitations. I think, yeah, the furthest we've gone is about 300-ish feet between them. Most ours are shorter though. They're probably in the 40 to 50 foot range, just based off how we do it. What I'm playing, the strips behind me actually are PoE powered. So I'm playing with splitting PoE, pulling 60 watts out, hitting a little teeny pixel controller. So at the scale we do it, probably not economical to go PoE, but we've got some a project I'm working on calls for it. So that's I've been running these for a little while now, just testing out to see, is it feasible to run if you had some real big 60, 90 watt PoE switches, could you run a lot of it off it? So so one could, yeah, so somebody here's got runs a show, they've got about 90 minutes. So that is one difference we do. A lot of shows you'll see like this, people will have 50 different sequences. You can actually, one of the cool things that people are starting to do a lot this year, some guys have done it longer, is you can actually go on and vote. You can request, you can jukebox. Our problem we have is we have our 1/2 mile loop here. And that's all we get. So any longer than about 7 minutes, and it'll just cause mayhem with traffic. I think our first year was 10 minutes, and it was too long. So partially that, partially 7 minutes is probably about the max my neighbor and I can pull off programming with this, without just having to quit our jobs for, a couple months on end. So partially dealing with traffic, partially because we write all the sequence for all this. We don't load in any sequence for it. 7 minutes seems to be about the sweet spot for it. So Victor asked, and I'm calling him out because I might actually have him come drive down and take a look at it. Automatic car counter. So this has come up every year. We've played with a couple ideas. I've played with doing we did try doing a brake detector one year, like just a laser brake detector. It was hard. It was hard getting the exact right angle. I have and just haven't gotten around to ever getting it up yet. Some security cameras that possibly will do it. But I am totally open to one of Victor's crazy Arduino ideas to do car counting. We will have about twice a year. The neighbor has let's see, his daughter's now 11. So for about the past 5 or 6 years, she'll just pick a night, sit in the window, and just count the cars as they go by. She usually does it like the first or second weekend, and then like right around. Starting this week, it's going to get really, really busy through Christmas Eve is just nonstop. There's been a couple years we've run it all night, and you'd be amazed somebody decides to drive through at 2 a.m. So she'll sit and count about those nights. In the beginning, we're like, oh, cool, we're doing this. Now it's at the point, there's so many cars. It'd be great to automate it. One of the other things I thought about automating just for, I don't know, bragging rights is how many times the show loops. So just having Q-SYS start every time it starts the sequence over, increment a counter, and then we can say we ran the show that many times that year. So there's definitely some cool things we've thought about expanding with it. It's also this year was just we added 80, 140, probably almost 190 trees this year. So this year was a lot about, we had to build up a lot more controllers. We build everything. So you get the parts, we mount it, we do all the wiring. We had to build a lot this year. I had to come up with how I was going to what I was doing at the new house. In years past, I had it down to science where I had cats to the exact length. I knew every extension. I knew how many on every tree. I knew what tree. I had to come up with a whole new game plan this year. So that took away from some of the more fun Q-SYS projects. We still got the network switch stuff in there, which has been really fun. But I'm excited to be able to start doing some stuff like that. I have a really good spot now to that I can mount some sort of sensor. So I'm definitely open to some suggestions on that. Let's see. Jeff threw the link in there. Where do we get our lights? So we actually buy enough now that we get them straight from a factory in China, and they'll do a production run just for us. But if you guys are looking, there's a bunch of great places, both stateside and internationally. AliExpress has all sorts of places. We get directly from Paul Zan, which I forget his exact company name, but if you search Paul Zan, you'll find it. Wired Watts is a place down in Georgia. I get a lot of supplies from. Wally's Lights I've ordered from before. There's a lot of places here stateside that import lights, and you can get them from. I bought a strand off Amazon for giggles. They just get expensive that way. When you bulk order them, you can get the strands at about $18-19 a strand, whereas if you get off Amazon, you're at like $30 a strand. So the downside is we have to order in about June, July to get them in by September. Great question we get asked all the time. Do we take the lights down and put them up every year? So that is a hot contentious debate amongst us. I take mine down every year and mine lasts much longer. But it's a lot of work. So my old house was over here-ish. I used to wrap 40 some trees. It'd take me 2 months to get it up and about a week straight to get it down. I think my record was I got the whole thing down in like 2 14-hour days. Because it was like 50s out like the week after New Year's. And so I just took 2 days off and went to town doing it. My neighbor who has this whole chunk of woods here, about 150 trees, he leaves his up. The downside is not so much the trees growing, because a lot of these are older trees, but critters love to eat them. So you get a lot of mice chewing through cables. So he's got a lot more repair to do on it. The pixels themselves also, how they're made is they bring these 2 wires in and then fill the whole back in with epoxy. Especially during COVID, the build quality went down a little bit. And so what will happen is water can seep in there. Water seeps in and shorts it out. Or these solders are not so there's 3 pads on either side they solder the cable down to. You'll get cold solder failures on there. So he has a lot more failures than I do, but he also doesn't have to take down as many. So it's a debate we have going on. Is it better? He's going on year 3 with them up. He's had to do repairs constantly this year. I've had to repair 1 pixel this year. So it's a time versus energy thing. There are some that stay up permanently. So I haven't done it at my new house yet, but a lot of us have permanent lights like mounted to gutters and window outlining and everything. I'm going to end up doing that next year. That'll be something permanent that stays up. So, but at least right now, the kids love going out and hanging lights all fall. So, and she is almost at the point she can help with it. Right now, she likes to supervise and tell me how to do it. So, it's a great activity to go spend time outside with them and do it. There's a good example. Yeah, driveway loop detector. So, definitely something I want to play with at some point, just for fun. Probably actually figure a way for Q-SYS to gather it and then make that data available up on the website so people can live see how many cars are going through and everything. Let's see. So Zach's definitely seen UV degradation. I've seen that. Wind damage. I haven't seen wind damage a ton, but that's mostly because we have them all wrapped right up on trees. And then we do. Where is the map? So these road lights I do. So these are just shepherd's hooks going up and down the street that just have the pixels hanging straight from them. Those I do see a lot of breakage on. It's not super strong. You're doing it all off solder points, basically. You're holding it on. The ones on trees, though, they seem to be holding up pretty well. We don't go insanely tight when we wrap them. There's definitely a little bit of wiggle. And then when you get to the top, we just wrap it around and tie it on itself. So, he was asking if we've had any better luck with any supplier. We've ordered from 4 or 5 different suppliers. They're all about the same. pixels are going to fail. It's just part of the game. So we're used to it. I have a bunch of pre-made up sets with 2 pixels and solder sleeves pre-attached on either side, just heat shrink solder sleeves. And when one goes bad, you go out, chop it out, put the new ones in. I don't think there's really any uh, better than other. There's really only about 3 factories that are making these in China. So every brand you get is just a resell of one of the other places. Awesome. I think I think that's all the questions. Thank you everybody for staying. I think we ran a little bit over. But this is a fun topic. I'll stick around if there's any other questions, but thank you all for coming out. Happy holidays. Hopefully everybody gets some nice time off, spend with your families and everything, and we will see everybody starting right at the beginning of the new year. I think Mr. Jeff Perkins is doing one of our first deep dives in the new year. The schedule should be going out pretty soon. Probably this week you'll see it come out. So yes, Jeff is doing Deep Lua in January. So definitely stay tuned for that. I don't remember off the top of my head the other ones, but you all see the e-blast coming out. You can always check out Q-SYS.com/webinars. That's where we post them as well. And I believe we're going to start posting them on communities as well. So awesome. Well, thank you everybody for coming out again. Definitely reach out. If you're getting into shows and everything, and yeah. Let's see. Richard asked, "Are we using business band or ham?" We're using business band. I have my ham license, but my neighbors don't. So we're using the unlicensed business band spectrum at like quarter watt for these. Awesome. With that, I will let everybody have a wonderful day. Have a great holidays, and we will see everybody soon.